Have you ever considered how different from each other the disciples were? Each of them, though having different personalities and gifts, was used by God in witnessing for Him. Hi, Dovann here, and welcome to another episode of Week at a Glance, where we dive into a thoughtful summary of this week's Bible study guide. And if you don't have a copy of the study guide, then be sure to check the link below. In this episode, we will talk about how the Holy Spirit makes it possible for you to have no limits in what you can do for God. I love receiving gifts. Who doesn't? Right? But you know how it is. The older you get, the pickier you become. Of course, we are thankful for what we receive, but if it is not something that we need or want, then that gift will just sit on a shelf. I remember when I was a young boy, it didn't matter what my parents, grandparents, aunts, or uncles gave me. I was always excited about the gifts. I used them, I also played with them. My aunts and uncles, they knew exactly what I needed and what I liked. Now, the Bible talks about the Holy Spirit who gives the gifts, who dispenses the gifts, and He knows exactly the gifts that you need. Here are the important points to remember for today's episode. The first point is understanding the gifts. When you accept Jesus, you become a part of a movement that shares Jesus to others and what God has done in your life. You become a witness for God. It doesn't matter in what stage of your spiritual life you're in. You can be and should be a witness for God, and He will supply and equip you with skills and talents that you will need for service. And the Bible calls this the spiritual gifts. In order to have a better understanding of the gifts, we need to recognize that gifts don't just magically pop out of somewhere from nowhere or from nothing. I believe that every gift has a story behind it. There is a giver, there is a gift, a receiver, and a purpose for the gift. Now let's put on our detective hats and glasses and go through several questions that will help us understand this much better. So who is the giver of the spiritual gifts? The Bible tells us that the Holy Spirit is the giver of all gifts. He gives the gifts that are best suited for our personalities and contexts. And who are the receivers of the gifts? The recipients are the witnesses of God. Hey, that's you and me. So don't worry so much if you think you are underqualified, because God does not call the qualified. He qualifies those whom He has called. Now moving on to the next question. What is the purpose of the spiritual gifts? The spiritual gifts are given to the witnesses, right? That is to you and me. So you and I could direct people to God. It is not for our selfish ambitions. Now the most straightforward purpose of spiritual gifts is for the glory of God. Any other purposes will come back to this one, because this is the most basic and fundamental purpose. But of course, there are other purposes. Now let's try and elaborate on this one. The spiritual gifts essentially serve two other purposes. The first one is to foster spiritual unity and also maturity in the church. The second one is to fulfill the mission of Jesus in reaching the world with the gospel. No wonder the Apostle Paul spends an entire chapter in 1 Corinthians and most of Romans chapter 12 and a large portion of Ephesians 4 on this topic, because a proper understanding of spiritual gifts is of vital importance to the church. Now, what are the different spiritual gifts? There are many different kinds of spiritual gifts. For the limited time that we have here, I will not be enumerating them. For an extensive list of the gifts, you can read 1 Corinthians 12, Romans 12, and also Ephesians 4. But these gifts can all be put in these three broad categories. The first one is revelation-oriented gifts, when one, for example, receives a message from God and communicates it to the church. The second one is leadership-oriented gifts. This is to facilitate unity in the church and also spiritual growth, and to equip members for mission. And the third one is ministry and service-oriented gifts, gifts for helping and serving others. We see a diversity of gifts. The difference is not on the value of a person, but on the function they take to contribute to the overall health of the church. The Apostle Paul in Romans 12 compares this to a human body. Each part is different, but each serves an important function to the health of the body. The gifts that you have are the ones that the Holy Spirit has seen most needful for your spiritual growth and for the cause of Christ. Now we have gone through a basic understanding of the gifts. Now let's see how to discover the gifts. Point number 2 is discovering the gifts. What I learned is that this is not done by doing a Google search or filling out a survey form. Discovering the gifts is a process of surrendering yourself to God and asking Him to reveal to you the areas He desires you to serve in for ministry. The church leadership is another instrument that God uses to assist members in discovering their gifts. Right after you discover your gifts, it is time to get involved, to develop these gifts. Now let's move on to the third and final point, growing the gifts. In Matthew 25, Jesus uses a parable to teach us how to grow our gifts, and it is by using, developing, and growing our gifts to the maximum of our abilities. For God, what matters isn't so much what you have, but rather what you do with what you have. This third point tells us that our gifts grow as we use them. And now I want you to look back over your own life. Can you think of a gift or gifts that God has given you that have expanded as you use them in ministry? I'd be very interested to hear the story. You can write me an email or write it in the comment section below. To all the aunties and also uncles and grandparents in the world, we are very thankful for the gifts that we receive. But beyond that, we are very thankful of the Holy Spirit for the spiritual gifts. Through the gift of the Holy Spirit and your cooperation with Him, you can be limitless in your service for God. In summary, here are the different points that we talked about in this episode on the gifts of the Holy Spirit. Understanding the gifts, discovering the gifts, and growing the gifts. Like always, if you find this episode helpful, then please share it with a friend. Spread the word and change lives one message at a time. And if you want to know more about how the Holy Spirit can level up your passion for witnessing, then click on this video right here. Grow the gifts of the Holy Spirit. Be a witness for God. This is again Dovann for Week at a Glance. I'll see you again next week.